Good evening. Tonight, on this Christmas Day, we're looking at a gift that the government desperately wanted to give the British electorate. The gift of control. For 10 years, perhaps longer, the rhythm of British politics has been set to a single relentless drumbeat. The beat of rising numbers. We fought a referendum on it. We reshuffled cabinets for it. We have seen home secretaries hired and fired based on their ability to manage it. Immigration has been the fault line running beneath our feet. And today, December 25th, 2025, we have been handed the final figures for the year. On the surface, the government has delivered. The drumbeat has stopped. The era of record-breaking net migration is over. The numbers have crashed. But if you look away from the spreadsheets and look at the screens, if you look at the beaches of Kent or the waiting rooms of our A&E departments, the silence is deceptive. We are living through a border paradox. We have successfully closed the front door to the UK, slashing the number of students and workers arriving at Heathrow. But the back door, the English Channel, is rattling violently. Irregular crossings are rising. The asylum backlog, which we were told would vanish, is stubbornly high. And in our care homes, a different kind of crisis is rising, a crisis of absence. The silence of empty shifts that cannot be filled. Tonight, for the next 20 minutes, I want to take you past the sound bites. We are going to dissect the data, the decisions, and the unintended consequences of the biggest border crackdown in modern history. Let's begin with the success story. And make no mistake, for the architects of the current policy, this is a success story. Cast your minds back to 2023. The post-Brexit system was open. We had a humanitarian duty to Ukraine and Hong Kong. We had a desperate need for workers after the pandemic. The result? Net migration peaked at over 750,000 people a year. It was a city the size of Leeds added to the population every single year. The political pressure was volcanic. So the government pulled the emergency brake. In the year ending June 2025, net migration fell to 204,000. That is a collapse of nearly 70%. It is the kind of statistical shift you rarely see in demographics without a war or a plague. How did they do it? It wasn't magic. It was brutal, bureaucratic efficiency. First, they targeted the students. Not the students themselves, but their families. In 2023, we welcomed 100,000 dependents of international students. Today, that number is effectively zero. The rule change was absolute. If you come to study, you come alone. Then they turned to the care sector. For years, we relied on care workers from Nigeria, India, and the Philippines. They were the engine of our social care system. But the government argued the system was being abused. So they banned care workers from bringing partners or children. Finally, they raised the drawbridge for skilled workers. The salary threshold, the minimum amount you must earn to get a visa, was hiked to nearly £39,000. That is well above the average UK salary. The effect was instantaneous. Applications from the major source countries dried up. The pull factor of a life in Britain was severed, not because people didn't want to come, but because the price of entry became too high. For the voters who said, the country is full, this is a promise kept. The population growth has slowed. The pressure on housing demand has technically eased. But as we are about to see, closing the legal routes did not stop the desire to move. It simply displaced it. If you stand on the white cliffs of Dover today, looking out towards France, the sea looks much the same as it always has. Gray, choppy, unforgiving. But the traffic on that water has changed. While we were busy closing the visa routes at the airports, the smuggling gangs on the French coast were diversifying their business model. The government slogan was "Stop the boats." The reality in 2025 is that the boats have not stopped. They have multiplied. Our analysis of the latest Home Office data shows that small boat arrivals for the year ending June 2025 hit 43,309. That is a 38% increase on the previous year. We are nearly back to the record levels of 2022. Why? Why is this rising when everything else is falling? Security experts call it the balloon effect. When you squeeze the legal routes, the air has to go somewhere. The safe and legal routes we heard so much about for Afghans. For Ukrainians have largely wound down or are incredibly difficult to access. If you are a young man in Sudan or a family in conflict-ridden zones of the Middle East and there is no visa office to apply to and no resettlement scheme to join, the smuggler becomes your only travel agent. The gangs know this. They have lowered their prices and increased the size of the dinghies. We are now seeing boats carrying 60, 70 people at a time. It is industrial-scale misery. And the tragedy is, the asylum system is clogging up again. We were told the backlog would be cleared. But as of September this year, over 62,000 people are still waiting for an initial decision. That's 62,000 people in limbo, unable to work, costing the taxpayer millions in hotel bills every day. So, we have a situation where the government can wave a piece of paper saying migration is down, but the public looks at their TV screens and sees chaos. The legal tax-paying worker has been blocked. The irregular, undocumented arrival continues. It is the exact opposite of control. Now, let's talk about the cost. Not the political cost, but the human cost. The cost measured in empty chairs and cold meals. We need to talk about social care. For decades, Britain has had a deal with the world. You send us your young workers, and we will let them build a life here while they care for our elderly. It was a symbiotic relationship. That deal is now dead. When the government banned care workers from bringing their families, they didn't just tweak a visa rule. They dismantled the recruitment pipeline. We spoke to recruitment agencies this week. In the second quarter of 2024, they brought in 25,000 carers. In the same quarter of 2025, they brought in fewer than 1,000, a drop from 25,000 to 1,000. The result is a catastrophe in slow motion. There are currently 150,000 vacancies in the care sector. These aren't just statistics. These are elderly people stuck in hospital beds because there is no one to care for them at home. These are dementia wards closing their doors to new residents. We spoke to a manager in Leeds yesterday. She told us, "I have British workers, but not enough. The work is hard, the pay is low. The immigrants were our lifeline." Now, I have to look a daughter in the eye and tell her I can't take her mother in because I don't have the staff. This is the border paradox in its cruelest form. We have protected our borders, but left our most vulnerable unprotected. We have saved the numbers, but we might be losing our compassion, our dignity in the process. Economists are warning that this will drag down our GDP. A shrinking workforce means a shrinking economy. The Chancellor might be celebrating the migration figures today, but he will be worrying about the growth figures tomorrow. So, where do we go from here? As we head into 2026, the political landscape is paralyzed. The government cannot reverse course. To reopen the visa routes now would be an admission of defeat. They have tied their reputation to that headline number, 204,000. They will defend it at all costs, arguing that the care sector must innovate and pay British workers more. It is a gamble that the economy can adjust before the NHS collapses. The opposition is equally trapped. They criticize the chaos of the boats, but they are terrified of being seen as soft on borders. They talk about skills and training, but they know that training a British nurse takes 3 years. Importing one takes 3 months. They have no short-term answer to the shortage. And in the middle, we have the reform movement pointing at the boats and saying, "See, nothing has changed." It seems we have reached a stalemate. A country that relies on migration but refuses to accept it. A country that wants a closed border but an open economy. Tonight, the figures are clear. The era of mass migration is paused. The graph has pointed down. But numbers on a page do not tell the whole story. They do not show the desperation in the channel. They do not show the exhaustion in the care home. We have learned that you can turn off the tap of legal migration with the stroke of a pen. But you cannot turn off the global forces that drive people to move: war, poverty, aspiration. And you cannot turn off the needs of an aging society that requires care. The border paradox of 2025 is that by trying to take absolute control, we may have lost our balance. The question for 2026 is not how low can the numbers go? The question is, what kind of country do we want to be when the gates are shut? Thank you for watching this special.